I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself.
I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings.
I wish I'd stayed in touch with my friends.
I wish that I had let myself be happier.
Staying true to yourself. I think staying true to yourself is possibly one of the hardest things to do. Have you ever had an experience when you go to talk to somebody and you're asking for some advice? You go to a friend or a colleague or whatever it is, maybe it's your mum, usually it's your mum actually, and you say, I've got this decision to make at work, or I've got this pair of shoes that I need to buy, and they're a bit different. I've got this kind of jacket that I want to buy, and it's kind of a different color than everyone else's, and I don't know whether it's going to fit in. And I don't really know. What do you think? And then you get this answer back that says, just be yourself. Have you ever had that? I've had that. Have you ever said that to somebody? Just be yourself. You'll be fine. Yeah, we've said it quite often. I say it quite often anyway. Just be yourself. I say it to my kids all the time. Just be yourself. Just be yourself. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. When really, what we need, what we're looking for when we go for advice, that kind of advice from somebody, we're looking for affirmation. We're looking for encouragement to be what we feel we already are. Because many of us, we already know what we're into and what we're not into. We already know what we're about. We've got an idea in our heart of hearts what is right and wrong. So the problem isn't that we don't know how to be ourselves. The problem is the courage and the boldness to be ourselves. We really are fearful of just being ourselves. So I think being yourself is probably one of the hardest things in the world to do. Now, none of us want to look back, do we? We don't want to look back with regret. We don't want to look back on our lives and think, why didn't I do it differently? Why didn't I stand up for myself? Why didn't I stand up for what I really believe? And we don't want to look back from our deathbeds and think, I should have done that. I should have done that. Actually, kind of the deathbed thing, that's a bit far away, isn't it? I don't want to look back in a year's time and say, I wish I'd done that differently. I actually don't want to look back in a month's time and say, I really regret that I said that, or I did that, or I didn't do that. Actually, I don't want to look back from tomorrow and say, that was a bad mistake. I really shouldn't have done that. But the thing is, we don't have to live with regret. We don't have to compromise what we believe. We don't have to simply conform. So the question is this: how do we live a life true to ourselves? We're going to read a passage from the book of Daniel. We're going to look at 4 guys. I'm going to tell you their names in a minute. But we're going to read a whole chapter from the book of Daniel. Are we ready for this? Is that a big deal? We love reading chapters of the Bible in this church. So let's get it up on the screen and let's get started. Daniel chapter 1. I hope my translation mixes with this one because I don't want to look at that screen down there. It looks a bit weird, doesn't it? So here we go. Daniel chapter 1. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord delivered Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, along with some of the articles from the temple of God. These he carried off to the temple of his God in Babylonia and put in the treasure house of his God. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, chief of his court officials, to bring in some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility, young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. He was to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that they would enter the king's service. Among these were some from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief official gave them new names. To Daniel, the name Belteshazzar; to Hananiah, Shadrach; to Mishael, Meshach; and to Azariah, Abednego. But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way. Now God had caused the official to show favor and sympathy to Daniel, but the official told Daniel, I am afraid of my lord the king, who has assigned your food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other young men your age? The king would then have my head because of you. Then Daniel then said to the guard, whom the chief official had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with the other young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see. So he agreed to this and tested them for 10 days. At the end of the 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the other young men who ate the royal food. So the guard took away their choice food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables instead. To these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning, and Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. At the end of the time set by the king to bring them in, the chief official presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them, and he found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the king's service. In every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. And Daniel remained there until the first year of King Cyrus. So tonight we're going to pick out 3 things that could have caused Daniel and his friends to not stay true to themselves. These 3 things are this. Number 1, surroundings. Number 2, cultural conformity. And number 3, identity. So we're going to look at our first one, which is surroundings. Now, I don't know if you feel like this, but sometimes when you go to a new place or you come to a new surroundings, it's kind of, you're surrounded by loads of new stuff and you think, actually, nobody knows me here. I can kind of throw off a little bit of my kind of the stuff that I had from home, my family, what my family think, what my mum and dad have always taught me. No one's here, no one knows me, so I can kind of do my own thing. No one will ever know. Daniel and his friends, they came to a new place and they had exactly those same temptations. I remember when I was 15 years old, I went on holiday to France with some of my friends. I'm laughing now because it was just so hilarious. 15 years old, I went on holiday with some of my friends to France. Now, why my mum let me go on holiday to France with my friends at 15, I would never know. My only explanation is this, that I looked a lot older for my age than I was. So my mum might have thought I was 18. I'm not sure. But it's not the case now. I don't look older than I am now, but back then I did. Keep that in mind. Anyway, we were on our way to France, me and my friends, and this is a terrible story to tell in church, but I've got to tell it anyway because it's a good example. I decided, I wasn't following Jesus at that time, and I decided that I was going to have a time of my life with my mates. We were going to smoke and we were going to drink and we were just going to do whatever we wanted to do because mum and dad weren't there and there was no kind of constraints on our lives, nothing. So I decided that I was going to try cigars, actually, for the first time. So I went and bought this little tin of Café Crème cigars. You know the ones? You shouldn't. But anyway, I bought this little tin and I bought a whole bunch of beers. And I thought to myself, at 15, I am going to get on this P&O ferry that's going across the channel. And I'm going to sit at the back of the ferry and I'm going to watch the sun go down and just enjoy myself with my mates. 15-year-old sun going down. What on earth? But it was, I decided I was going to do that, so I sat there and I remember sparking up this cigar and having this beer there and thinking, this is the life. This is unbelievable, just loving life. Anyway, let me back up a little bit. My family had this other family that we were friends with called the Woodwards. And the Woodwards were perfect. They were honestly, but they'd never done anything wrong. Never. They were completely perfect people. And we were friends with them as a family, and they thought that I was also quite a well-made person, a well-made human being. I had my stuff together. So I'd managed to fool them quite well that I was a kind of a lovely, polite young lad, did everything right. When they had a night out, for them, it was just, they had a night kind of in. They just picked some herbs from the garden, they played charades. That was it. That was their thing. They love life. They absolutely love life. And it was just all good. It was all good for them. And I was like, oh, I could never live like these people. But they were lovely people. Anyway, what I didn't know was that Mrs. Woodward, she'd run out of herbs. And she was taking a trip to France to buy some new ones. Okay, the herbs bit isn't true, but the trip to France is. So there I was, thinking that I was free as a bird, smoking my cafe cremes and drinking my beer at the back of this ferry. And who should walk round the corner? Mrs. Woodward. She walks round the corner, we locked eyes. And she said, the first thing she said was, Matthew, does your mother know you're doing this? And the thoughts that went through my mind, honestly, I've got a little bit of creativity in me. So the creativity kicked in straight away. I thought, this is it. I am going to pretend I'm French. That there's someone that just looks like me. So I was like, je ne comprends pas. Yeah. And because that was the only word that I knew in French, because I hadn't listened to a word of my French for 4 years. So I was there trying to pretend, and it was like, oh, this is terrible. That was it. I was busted. I had tried to use my new circumstances, my new surroundings to break out of what I knew was right and what I knew was wrong. Now, okay, cafe cremes and a beer, let's not get too freaked out about that. But for me, I knew it was a thing of rebellion against what my mum and dad would have wanted. And it was something that was out of character as far as the way that I'd been brought up. So I was using these new circumstances to do something that I shouldn't have done. New circumstances can change things for you. For Daniel and his 3 friends, now these guys, they weren't just your average guys at all. These guys, they had 6 packs. It doesn't say it in the Bible, but I just know that they did. They weren't just normal guys. I mean, for goodness sake, they were like 10 times smarter than everybody else, and they were picked when Nebuchadnezzar came to Jerusalem to take them away from Jerusalem and bring them to Babylon. He chose the best. He chose the best of the best and said, actually, let's take the best guys here, let's bring them back, and let's kind of indoctrinate them. So they came there to these new surroundings. They came from Jerusalem, which means the city of peace, and they were brought to a place called Babylon, which means confusion, or gateway of the gods. So you come to Babylon. Actually, it wasn't just that you could come to Babylon and you had to be a little bit careful. You could do whatever you wanted there. They had all kinds of different gods. There seemed to be no restrictions on anything. It was utter confusion. And these 4 guys rocked up there. Now, they could have had the time of their lives. They had the king's food, the king's wine. They had everything. They could have had everything. But they said, no, we are going to resolve in our hearts to be who we really are. To be true to ourselves and not to give in to everything that gets thrown our way. Now, we're 4 guys, we're rocking up, we can do whatever we want, but they say no. We're resolving in our hearts. In verse 8, it says this, Daniel resolved that he wouldn't defile himself with the king's food. And you think, why did he do that? Down to details. These guys were probably teenagers and knew that a lot of that food would have been sacrificed to foreign gods. And they were like, I'm having no part in that. I want no part in anything that is not going to allow me to stay true to myself, to what I really believe is right. In the King James Version of the Bible, it says he purposed in his heart or resolved in his heart that he wouldn't even defile himself with the food. I mean, I don't know if I could be a vegetarian. They ended up being vegetarians for ages. Who would do that, really? Anyway, quite an amazing thing. So you come to a new place. What is your resolve? Are your circumstances, are your surroundings going to decide what you're about? Are the temptations around you going to decide what you're about? Or are you going to nail your colors to the mast right at the start of maybe a new term or a new period of your life at university or whatever it might be for any of you here? Are you going to nail your colors to the mast and say, actually, I'm in new surroundings. I'm surrounded by loads of new temptations. Everything that no one can see me. I'm on my own. I'm on a P&O ferry on the channel. I can do whatever I want. No, you can't. Mrs. Woodward is just around the corner. What is your resolve going to be? What is your resolve? You can say loads of stuff, but what are you resolving in your heart? What are you saying about your life? Are you going to stay true to yourself? Are you going to have the boldness and the courage to do that? Or are you going to be tempted by everything that's around you? Are your surroundings going to give you a type of freedom that will eventually just lead you into captivity? Cultural conformity. Daniel and his friends were there for 3 years. They were taught the language, the literature, the culture of the Babylonians. And the plan of the Babylonians was not just the Babylonians. Makes it sound like something you find at a zoo, doesn't it? The Babylonians, it wasn't just to take them captive. It was to indoctrinate their most gifted and talented. It was to take the best. It was to indoctrinate the future leaders so that everything would be totally scuppered for the future. For Israel, it was to take their best and say, actually, let's change them. Let's indoctrinate them. Let's make them think differently. Let's give them a new language. Let's totally separate them from everything that they've learned before. But the thing I like about Daniel and his friends, and I think sometimes the church has got something to learn from this, is that they didn't huddle down in a corner and try and protect themselves from everything. They actually went on and embraced it completely, but they didn't let it change who they really were. They stayed true to themselves. They learned the language. They learned everything. They learned the culture. They learned the whole lot. And in verse 20 it says, in every matter of wisdom and understanding, the king found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters that were in his kingdom. So it wasn't that they kind of got scared of their culture. They learnt it. They took it on. They said, yeah, bring it. And we're actually going to be smarter than the rest. We're going to do it better than everybody else. But you are not changing my heart. You're not changing my heart. And you might have come here to study, or you might be going away to study, or whatever you might be doing. There's decisions that need to be made. You're going to learn loads of stuff. And it's amazing. Actually, learn it. Be 10 times better than everybody else, but guard your heart. Make a decision that my heart is not going to be changed by all of this. Cultural awareness and engagement are very, very important, but conformity will just erode your influence. We have to engage 100%, but when the moment we conform, that is the moment we just become like everybody else. Conformity just erodes your influence. We are actually called to change the world. And you cannot change the world if you just decide to conform. Being a Christian is not about protecting yourself from the world and everything in it. It's about embracing it with the love of God. And we have nothing to fear. Matthew 16, verse 18. It's talking about the church. It says that the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Now that's painting a really strong picture, isn't it? The gates of hell will not prevail against the church. It will not prevail against you and me. It's like saying actually evil is really bad. It's terrible. There's loads of terrible stuff everywhere. But actually what's going on the inside of us and the inside of you, if you believe in Jesus, it has no match to what's going on the inside of you. There is nothing that can stop it. He who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. We have nothing to fear. We are called to be the change, not to conform. And when we conform, we're just not being true to ourselves. Finally, identity. The Babylonians changed the names of these 4 guys. Now, I tried to memorize all the names, but I just couldn't. Well, I could, but I thought it would look really stupid if I mess it up in front of everybody. So I've written them down. Daniel, his name, God is judge. You know, back in these times, this was 605 before Christ, so 605 years before Jesus came. Back in these days, when people were given names, they were given names that meant something. You see, we're going to have a lot of Justins in 5 years' time because of Justin Bieber, So we name people because, because of some famous person or it's a name that we like a lot of the time. But back in these days, it was like, no, they had proper names. Daniel, God is judge. So whenever his mum and dad shouted out for him, God is judge, come in for your kebab or whatever that they were having. There was this, like, they might not have had kebabs then. I don't know. Hananiah, God is gracious. God is gracious, put your bicycle in the shed. Every time their names were shouted, there was a worship, a praise of God. There was a lifting up of God. Mishael, who is like God? Who is like God? Your pizza's getting cold. Just every time, whatever you do, whatever you said, they kind of praise God every time they called out to their children. Azariah, whom God helps. They changed Daniel's name to Belteshazzar. May Bel protect. Bel was Nebuchadnezzar's favorite god. So he named him after that. May Bel protect. Hananiah to Shadrach. Command of Aku. I think Aku was the god of the moon, I think. Mishael, his name was changed to Meshach. Who is like Aku? And Abednego, servant of Nebo. Nebo was another god they had, the Babylonians had. So they even tried to change their identity. They no longer said, God is judge, God is gracious, who is like God, whom God helps. They changed their names to praise gods that weren't even real. Identity, they kept hold of their identity. Even though they tried to change their culture and their surroundings and their identity, they chose to stay true to themselves. It's often very difficult to stay true to ourselves. It's not something that just happens. It's not just the simple thing, I'll just be yourself. It is a conscious decision. Just being yourself doesn't happen because you've opened your eyes in the morning and you wake up and you go about your thing, doing your thing through the day. Being yourself and staying true to yourself is a conscious decision. That is why so many people look back on their lives and say, why didn't I stay true to myself? Why didn't I this, that, or the other? Why didn't I stay true to my convictions? Why didn't I hold on to what I really believed in? Why did I let so many things erode what I know is right? Often it's fear. We are afraid of not being accepted. We're afraid of what other people would think. A fear of man, unhealthy fear of man, causes us to let go of the central pillars of our lives and put them to one side. We often come back to them. I see time and time again, talking with people, they've gone away from the things they knew were right. They come back years later and it's like, I have wasted so much time. But God is into restoration. And you might think, actually, that's me, Matt. That's just the way I am. I've been away for ages. And I feel like I've kind of let everything in my life kind of be eroded by all kinds of things. But God is into restoration. And he's able to deal with everything. But I would say the best way is to resolve in your heart, this is the way I want to live my life. This is the way I want to live my life. When I became a Christian when I was 18, 3 years after my P&O experience, I knew that I had to make some serious choices, not just about the here and now, but for the rest of my life. What's the rest of my life going to look like? Sometimes we need to figure out what our preferred future is going to look like. We need to set our eyes on that and say, I am not going to let anything take me away from that. I think Daniel and his 3 friends had a preferred future. It wasn't just that they wanted to be good little Babylonians and do all the right stuff, but also kind of keep their faith kind of carefully tucked away. They knew the kind of future they wanted to see. They didn't get out of captivity, they stayed in there. But people like Daniel, people like his friends, meant that what they had in their heart could be passed on to the next generation. They knew they'd set their eyes on a preferred future. Have you set your eyes on a preferred future? Have you set your heart on something that you want to see? Have you decided who you are? Have you decided what you are going to be? Tonight, it's completely possible to say, actually, I am not going to look back with regret. I don't think it's arrogant. I don't think it's unreasonable. I think it's something that we need to do. Say, actually, I am not going to look back with regret. So many times, we feel that our confidence has been smashed. And I think sometimes in our family settings, the people that should have built us up and helped us to be ourselves and given us the confidence to be ourselves are the ones that have actually broken it down a little bit. I talk with a lot of people, and it happens with dads. Dads should be the ones that really kind of get under their kids and like, actually, I'm gonna stick you up on my shoulders, and you're gonna be more than I've ever been, and you're gonna be great, and it's gonna be fantastic, and always affirming them, encouraging them. One of the most damaging things in the world is when a dad doesn't do that. One of the worst things is when a dad does the opposite and actually says, you ain't gonna be anything, and kind of knocks you down. And it sounds crazy that dads could do that. And I don't know, I was talking to someone earlier this week, so it got me thinking about this exact thing. It seems crazy that dads would do it, but I know there's probably loads of people in this room that have had that kind of treatment, and they're like, actually, it's so affected my confidence. I don't feel like I can be myself. I don't feel strong enough, confident enough, bold enough to stand up for what I really believe. And a lot of it stems from the fact that you just haven't, the people that should have lifted you up have pulled you down. And I'd like to say tonight, if you're one of those people that feel like, I just don't feel like I've been picked up. I feel like every time I got to do something, I got to muster up all the courage, every bit of strength in me to make it happen. And even then, it's really difficult. And I'm kind of looking for affirmation from everybody because I'm not quite sure what to think. And I don't know what to think about myself. What do other people think about me? Do you know what? There's nothing quite like having God, our Father in heaven, say, actually, I'm well pleased with you. When we have that sense that God is pleased with us, the confidence surges through our veins, and we can do life. We can stay true to ourselves. But often we feel like, my confidence is gone. I feel smashed. If you feel smashed tonight, it's got nothing to do with the Incredible Hulk. It's a bad thing. I don't know why I said that. I watched this Avengers Assemble with my boys last night. Sorry. If you feel broken by people speaking down or breaking you down when they should have built you up, I would like you to be prayed for. I'd like to pray for you. We're going to have a time of ministry really soon. And if you are one of those people here tonight that feel like being true to yourself is almost impossible, you find it so hard, you find that your surroundings are causing you to be tempted in all kinds of ways, your new surroundings, maybe you've had a real bad week. Maybe your first week in Bristol was really disappointing for you. And you were like, I'm disappointed with myself. It's okay. God is into restoration. Short-term restoration, even if it's just a little crazy little period of your life. And long-term, if you feel you've been away from God for a long time, He can restore it all. I think we'll, can we get the worship band up a bit? Is that okay? And we're going to go into a time of ministry. And I would really love to pray with some of you guys. If you're thinking, actually, I'm starting a new season of my life, and I don't feel that I've got the strength to handle this. I don't feel that I've got what I need to get a hold of this and make a difference. I don't feel that I can really be true to myself, or I'm struggling with that. It would be really great to pray with you. And if you're one of those people that you feel that you've been spoken down or you've been crushed by people that should have built you up, we'd love to pray with you. Can we lead into a little time of worship? And if there's any on the ministry team that have got any words that they want to bring, we'll open up for that as well.